why don't you occasionally drag out some old pictures and relics of the history of your church to constantly train people to respect their heritage. Look, there was a church here before you came. There's going to be a church here after you left. You're just a steward. And you know what? It elevates their sense of mission and their vision. Let me close by showing you a picture of my roots. I've shown this picture quite a bit, and Jim Dalrymple suggests maybe I could do it again since it relates to this subject. This is a picture of First Christian Church, Meadville, Pennsylvania, about 1940 or so. Now, this is not a very impressive-looking bunch of people. Pretty sorry-looking bunch of people. This Meadville, Pennsylvania, about 40 miles south of Lake Erie, gets, I think, the third highest snowfall of any city in America. It's a depressed area. I showed the picture to a group of preachers recently, and one said, Bob, I grew up in Meadville, and I was in 8th grade before I understood that the Lord's Prayer was not deliver us from Meadville. But this is the kind of church that people make fun of. Church of the past, what kind of influence could this bunch of people ever have? But before you trace this church, let me tell you about some of the people in the picture. On the far left is Sue Anderson. She was our church organist. She married to Homer Anderson. On the far right, he's a mailman. They must have been having some marital problems this day, but they usually kept it together. Homer and Sue, salt of the earth people. They have a daughter who's here today, Donna Cole. Donna Cole, for years, was an executive with Team Expansion, helping to send missionaries all over the globe. Her daughter's a missionary. Her son, Tim Cole, for the last 20 years, I believe, has been in charge of all the new church plants for Christian Church in the state of Virginia. Done a spectacular job. First Christian Church, Meadville, Pennsylvania. On the far right, Stanley Betray. He married a little girl in the front, Mabel Betray. This is prior to World War II. After World War II, Stanley and Mabel Betray felt called of God to go to Tokyo, Japan, to take the gospel to the enemy. They stayed there for over 30 years. There are Japanese people in heaven today. There are Christian churches in Tokyo because of First Christian Church, Meadville, Pennsylvania. In the middle are Edgar and Eva Pressey. Let me just say, not real glamorous people, but faithful people. Eva is holding in her arms a little baby, Arnold Pressey. Arnold Pressey is a preacher in North Carolina today. But when Arnold Pressey was a little kid, his parents didn't discipline him very much. And everybody said, that kid is a holy terror. He is going to burn this church down. But my dad taught him in 5th grade. My dad would come home saying, Arnold Pressey's going to wind up in the penitentiary. You can just write it down. He's a preacher in North Carolina today. On the back row is Charles Ward, kind of a stern, legalistic elder. People a little afraid of him. But Charles Ward's daughter, Dorothy Haddenham, missionary to Alaska. I think he's got 3 grandsons in ministry. On the front row are my mother and father. If you look closely, these are the only people in the picture smiling. And the reason is they haven't had me yet. They're holding my older sister, Roseanne, who grew up to be a really good Bible teacher. She's always single, but one of 6 children that my parents trained in the Lord. I wish you could have known my dad. My dad was the 17th of 18 kids. His mother died when he was 3. His father was an alcoholic. He got tossed around from older sister to older sister. And as Josh mentioned, that he doesn't have a spiritual heritage, but he's got spiritual mothers and fathers because when he's about 19, he met my mother, who was a Christian. He gave his life to the Lord, and he never looked back. Even though he had 6 children and he scraped to get by working in a blue-collar job in a zipper factory, 1/10 of every paycheck went to the Lord. And my parents, we went to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. I remember one time asking, do I have to go? Dumbest question I ever asked. When I was in this, my dad broke the cycle. And if you didn't grow up with a rich spiritual heritage in your family, please look this. You can break the cycle. You can start your own history. When I was in the 7th grade, my parents helped to start a new church in a little town where we live, 15 miles from Meadville. 30 people in that church. But my dad loved that church. First one there, last one to leave. We had an early preacher who skipped town, leaving a lot of unpaid bills. And my dad was so concerned our church was going to have a bad reputation in the community, so he went to the bank and borrowed $2,500 back in the late 50s to pay off all the preacher's bills. And then he took a second job working in a sawmill to pay it back. Now, when you got a dad like that, you're going straight into the ministry, whether you want to go or not. So I became a preacher. I've got a brother who's a preacher. I've got 2 sisters married to preachers. Now, I do have one sister who's a black sheep. She married a deacon. But you've got people in your family you're a little ashamed of, too. My parents have 6 grandsons in ministry and a great-grandson now studying for ministry. On the back row is D.P. Schaefer, the preacher. D.P. Schaefer's son, Raymond Schaefer, became the 2-term governor of the state of Pennsylvania. I show people this picture and they say, wow, that's such a great church to have that kind of impact. No, pretty average church. They had their problems, never grew to more than 180 people. Not too long after this picture was taken, they asked D.P. Schaefer to resign because nothing was happening in the church. But look at 70 years later, the heritage of that church, the influence of that church all over the world. Now let me ask you, 70 years from now, when somebody looks at a picture of your church, after they get finished laughing at how you're dressed and what your hair looks like, what are they going to say about your influence?